Hello and welcome, Talkin really, and today's story is about the transport ministers giving permission to councils and schools to basically ignore the accessibility laws for public transport. So yes, this story came out this weekend, and it was about the transport ministers quietly giving permission to councils, schools and colleges to be able to breach a key anti-discrimination law for at least 2, possibly 4 years, right in the middle of a general election campaign, when basically all of the ministers are not available to discuss it. So the decision by ministers to allow providers of home-to-school services for students to continue running inaccessible vehicles has been done while Parliament is not in session. It means that MPs and peers have not been given a chance to question this decision. DfT, Department for Transport, said that the decision was made by ministers before Parliament ended, but the letter was not sent out until last week. In the letter, education providers are told that they will be allowed a temporary exemption to the PSVA, which is the Public Service Vehicle Accessibility regulations, even though they've had 20 years to prepare for these regulations, which come into force in January. The regulations require vehicles to have a wheelchair space and boarding facilities, priority seating, colour contrasting step edges and other features to enable disabled passengers to travel in comfort and safety. Coaches that have been built from 2005 onwards have until January 2020, that's just 5 weeks away, to comply with PSVAR, but many providers have failed to prepare for the change and are continuing to use inaccessible coaches that segregate disabled and non-disabled students on their journey. Now, with the 1st of January deadline just weeks away, ministers have sent an urgent letter to councils, schools and colleges giving them a temporary exemption. Vehicles that provide for only free school transport do not have to meet the regulations, but many education providers run paid-for services or mixed services that provide some free seats but charge other students to use the service. This means that under the law they should stop charging all students, only allow students entitled to free school transport to use the service, or ensure that they only use accessible vehicles. The issue first became public in February of this year when Accessible Transport campaigner began legal action against North Yorkshire Council for continuing to use inaccessible buses while still charging some pupils to use the spare seats. But the government have left it until last week, when Parliament was not in session and no one was there to discuss it, to write letters and send them out to schools giving them the exemption. The DfT says, "We have recently become aware many providers of fully paid for and mixed home-to-school services are not in a position to provide compliant services currently or from January 2020 onwards, and that many providers will cease to provide mixed services rather than secure appropriate vehicles." The ministers concluded that in these circumstances, the right solution was to offer operators the temporary exemption to allow them to become compliant. The letter adds, "In making this decision, ministers took account of the implications of these services ceasing for both pupils and local authorities, as well as the importance ministers place on ensuring that transport services are accessible to both disabled and non-disabled people." The transport campaigner, Mr. Pawley, said the government decision to mass exempt buses was a disgrace, as it would mean transport providers could continue to segregate disabled children while the education sector could continue to use inaccessible vehicles. To me, their actions are undermining the clearly expressed intent of Parliament. What you should know is that the councils and schools involved have had since the year 2000. So they've had 20 years to sort this out, and it just shows that the whole thing is a complete shambles. What I thought we'd have a look at while we're here is the actual legislation that the PSVAR is referencing, so you can have a little look and see that. So the idea is abiding by this from January the 1st. Now, the PSVAR applies to all new public service vehicles, that's buses and coaches. So with a capacity of 22 passengers plus, it's got to be used to provide a local or scheduled service. It applies in England, Scotland and Wales, and it's the responsibility of the Department for Transport, DfT. All full-size single-deck buses will be fully accessible from 1st of January 2016, and all double-decker buses from January the 1st, 2017. New buses weighing 7.5 tonnes have been required to have wheelchair access from 2005. All buses weighing up to 7.5 tonne have been required to be fully accessible from 1st of January 2015, and now coaches will have to be fully accessible from the 1st of January 2020. Compliance. Now, there is a fine, not excluding a level 4 on the standard scale, which is 2,500. This is for every offence. Improved bus access for disabled people. So this is regulation govern access to service buses and coaches, known as the PSVAR. And obviously this will be applied to local or scheduled services since the 31st of December 2000, carrying more than 22 passengers. Low-floor buses. In recent years, low-floor buses have been introduced. The PSVAR do allow for high-floor vehicles, but bus operators and manufacturers of full-size buses have by and large opted for low-floor vehicles. Over 1/3 of full-size buses are now low-floor vehicles, rising to 80% in major urban areas, and 90% of London buses are low-floor. The PSV also includes the rules about how bus drivers are supposed to be helping people, wheelchair users, disabled people, to board and alight from their vehicles. These regulations only apply to vehicles which are regulated under PSVAR, and we strongly recommend that bus operators adopt those practices for all their accessible buses. Wheelchair suitability for buses. They've commissioned a reachability to produce a guide, Wheels Within Wheels, which outlines what wheelchair users can expect from newer trains, coaches, buses and taxis. Electric scooters on buses, it says here, none of the regulations deal with scooters. This is because a scooter is an outdoor vehicle intended as an alternative to public transport for short trips. They are generally less manoeuvrable and cannot be used as a seat on a vehicle. I would argue the toss, but hey. Complaints, you should contact the appropriate bus operating company. If this does not provide satisfaction, then you can contact the Bus Users UK, an independent body, and Scotland has its own complaints tribunal. Audible and visible announcements on buses. Trials of these have been in Leeds since 2001, showed that their introduction on buses did present some technical challenges. Of course, they are. I don't know how widely adopted they are at the moment, being 18 years later. The bus accessibility guide. So the PSVAR regulations apply to all new buses, blah, blah, blah. There's published for vehicle manufacturers and operators to assist in meeting the regulations. Exemption under 43 of the DDA 1995. The Secretary of State may authorize by means of a special authorization order the use of a regulated public service which does not comply with accessibility regulations. Training. There is a dedicated sector skills council for passenger transport. They offer a range of training courses from introductory to MBQ level qualifications. And there's an MBQ course for bus drivers. This is reachability.org.uk, RIDC, which is the Research Institute for Disabled Consumers, and they were charged with doing a research document about this particular subject. Anyway, so that is it for today. I hope you enjoyed that. It was pretty interesting, and of course another typical reaction from the government. You know, they've had 20 years to do something and it's not been done. Sounds about right. Anyway, have a good day and goodbye.